Hi guys, in this video, I'm going to have an exam review session with a past paper. The paper is IB Economics Paper 3 from November 22 exam. Let's give it a go. Question 1. Best Meals is one of many small catering companies, each of which prepares a variety of different meals for airlines in country X. Table 1 shows the cost of production in US dollars on a per-hour basis for Best Meals. Question A1. Determine the missing cost figures and insert your answers in table 1. First, for the total cost, I can calculate this by using marginal cost and the previous total cost. Since marginal cost is the additional cost that you spend to produce one more unit from the previous level, so I added 6.5 to 101.5 to get total cost for quantity 15. Which is 108. And I divided this with quantity 15 to get the average value, 7.2. Next, I multiplied 7.19 with 16 to get the total cost to 115.04. To get the marginal cost, I subtracted 108 from 115.04. A2, assuming that this catering market is in long-run equilibrium, sketch a diagram in which the profit-maximizing level of output for a firm in this market is shown. Actually, this firm is in a monopolistic competition because there are many small catering companies. However, it sells differentiated products. So the diagram should be looking like this, having the profit maximizing point where MR curve meets MC curve. Also, the long run equilibrium has to have the price equals to ATC, but not at the lowest ATC level. The catering companies buy tomatoes from the domestic market to prepare their meals. Figure 1 illustrates the domestic market for tomatoes, which is perfectly competitive. S is supply and D is demand. In order to support the incomes for the tomato farmers, the government of X has set a price floor at 2.80 per kilogram. So for the question, I need to calculate the change in the consumer surplus resulting from this government intervention. So previously, the consumer surplus was this much big, but due to the price floor, it's going to decrease this much. Change as minus, since it is decreasing. Question A4. With reference to figure 1, explain how the price floor will impact on allocative efficiency in the market for tomatoes. As we have seen from the diagram, there will be deadweight loss. So I can explain that allocative efficiency should be achieved at the point where price is equal to marginal cost. However, due to the price floor, producers are producing more than before, which is 20,000. So it is not achieving allocative efficiency. Question 5. Calculate the indirect tax paid by airlines for the catering meals they bought in 2021 if the domestic indirect tax rate on food was 6.5 and their expenditure on meals was $54,500 something. I first calculate the expenditure without including tax, which is going to be this much. If I minus the value from the total expenditure, then I can get the tax amount. Question 6. The impact of a 4.5% rise in the price of airline tickets on the quantity of leisure travel demanded has been calculated to be minus 10.26%. Using the figures in table 3, calculate the impact of the same 4.5% rise in the price of airline tickets on the quantity of business travel demanded. Business travel minus 0.34 and percent change of price 4.5, then I can get the answer. The Economist Intelligence Unit is predicting that between 2020 and 2030, global incomes will rise on average by 3% annually. Using relevant information from Table 3, describe the expected impact this rise in global incomes will have on the demand for domestic routes in relation to the demand for international routes. YD, income change. So let's go to find some data. YD, domestic routes, 1.1 something, international routes, 1.5 something. So this one is less elastic. Yeah, then I can say that YD is, since YD is lower for domestic routes than international routes, so the demand for domestic routes will increase by a smaller percentage compared to international routes. Question 8. The information on page 6 strongly suggests that the aviation industry is responsible for a significant market failure. Using this information on an appropriate diagram, explain the market failure the aviation industry creates. I can draw a negative externality of production diagram and explain that since the current equilibrium is not at MSB equals MSC, the aviation industry is responsible for negative externalities leading to overproduction. Question B. Using the text data provided and your knowledge of economics, recommend a policy that may be implemented to reduce the contribution of emissions the aviation industry makes to global warming. My intro will start with a brief summary of the given industry, which is aviation industry, and then I can present my policy recommendation. This time, I recommend the policy of imposing carbon pricing. In body 1, I can explain the logic behind recommending this policy. As the reference says, a flight from San Francisco to Paris can produce around this much amount of carbon emissions, and this is this much negative and things like that. I can argue that there is urgent need of regulation. So I can resonate that implementing a carbon tax or a cap and trade system within the industry. Also, considering the reference saying that the Economist Intelligence Unit is predicting that between 20 and 30, global incomes will rise and blah, blah, blah. So I can conclude that the demand for the service will keep increasing, and we cannot really forcefully eliminate the growing market demand. Therefore, the answer is to make the flight itself more eco-friendly, such as making them using more eco-friendly alternative fuels. So this would involve assigning a price to carbon emissions from aviation activities, either through a tax levied on aviation fuel or by requiring airlines to purchase emission permits. Then airlines would have a financial incentive to reduce their emissions and use more eco-friendly fuels. So that's why I recommend this policy. However, I'm aware of the fact that there are potential constraints on my policy recommendation. Since the text says that the energy source for aircraft is not easily substitutable, and also it says aviation emissions are not expected to be easily reduced, so those can prove the fact that the regulation policy can be a bit stagnating. Also, as the text says, the aviation industry's growth has also accelerated as a result of subsidy provision, tax redemptions from the government, etc. So the national level of support in the industry is a challenging factor to apply global level of regulation. So that's why this policy requires a global scale of co-adoption. In conclusion, nonetheless, I still recommend this policy because I understand the gravity of the issue. Question 2. Figure 2 illustrates the daily world price of wheat in US dollars. A1. Describe the information shown in figure 2. You can see from the figure, it looks pretty fluctuating. So I can say that wheat prices increased from around 4 to something to around 6 something and decreasing, which is quite volatile. On 17 December 2020, Turkey eliminated a 20% tariff it has imposed on wheat imports from Russia. Russia had recently decided to introduce a tax on its wheat exports. Turkey is the largest flour exporter in the world, and Turkish flour exporters buy 85% of the wheat they need in their production process from Russia. Using figure 2 and the information above, explain 2 reasons that may account for Turkey's decision to eliminate the 20% tariff on wheat imports from Russia. First reason I can think of would be that the price of wheat has been rising. As we have seen from the figure above, it has increased by 35% in 6 months. And the elimination of the tariff would keep wheat prices low in that sense, so that it can help to maintain the competitiveness of Turkish flour in its export markets. Second reason I can possibly think of would be that there may have been a poor harvest in Turkey. Thus, the policy of eliminating the tariff, which is going to decrease the price, would help to prevent the domestic wheat price from increasing too much, ensure food security. Figure 3 illustrates the Turkish wheat market. Before the 20% tariff was eliminated, the price for wheat in Turkey was $7.2 per kilogram, and the given following information. Using figure 3, calculate the change in social community surplus that resulted from the elimination of the 20% tariff. When there was tariff, the social surplus was this much for the consumer and this much for the producer. However, after the elimination of the tariff, they are increasing. Consumer surplus is increasing this much, even though the producer surplus is going to decrease a bit. Anywho, so change in consumer surplus, change in producer surplus, which is a minus number, and then I sum these two, and then I can get the change in social surplus. Next question. The currency of Turkey is the Turkish lira, and it has these kind of exchange rates. Using figure 3, calculate in TL the change in the monthly total revenues of Turkish wheat producers as a result of elimination of the 20% tariff. Let me first check the figure 3, and I can calculate the change pretty simply. And then I should reflect the exchange rate. So 1 over US dollar. So it's going to be this much US dollar value. Table 4 shows the income tax rates in Turkey for 2020. Using information from table 4, calculate the additional income tax Beacon would pay if the Turkish government decided to increase the marginal tax rates for incomes over 600,000 something to 55%, as it has been in Austria since 2016. The difference between his income and the income level, which is the highest income level, is going to be 354 something. And the additional tax rate increase is from 40 to 55. So I can calculate additional tax amount that he has to pay. Next question, using the income distribution information in table 5, construct a fully labeled Lorenz curve diagram for Turkey in 2017. So I need to reflect that. I reflected the values and then constructed the Lorenz curve diagram. Using the data in table 6, explain why a greater reliance on indirect taxes compared to income taxes for revenue collection is often associated with a higher Gini coefficient value. I can explain that indirect taxes are regressive with respect to income, and it gives more tax burden to the poor people proportionately. In this regard, if there is a greater reliance on indirect taxes in the country, it means technically the country harms the economic equity of the country by leading higher Gini coefficient value. To be more specific, Turkey relies much more on indirect taxes, 40.5% compared to other countries. So that's why it explains Turkey has greater income inequality compared to other countries. The following information was published in the United Nations Development Programme, blah, blah, blah. Identify one reason for the difference between Turkey's GNI per capita ranking and its HDI ranking. After reading the text, one reason I can presume is that the country's spending on education is low compared to other countries. That's why it is having the difference between HDI ranking and GNI per capita ranking, because HDI reflects more qualitative measures. Question B. Using the text data provided and your knowledge of economics, recommend a policy that the government of Turkey could introduce to reduce income inequality. My intro will start with a brief summary of the given country's economic state, and I can present my policy recommendation. This time, I would love to recommend the policy of raising dependence on progressive taxation and decreasing the reliance on indirect taxation. First, I can talk about my logic behind recommending this policy. I reckon that to address severe income inequality in this country, the government should consider implementing or enhancing progressive taxation policies, where higher income earners and corporations are taxed at higher rates. As the text says, Turkey relies too much on indirect taxes compared to other countries and relying too less on direct taxes. So I believe this means that the country's taxation system is highly undesirable. The changes that the taxation system can include increasing income tax rates for high income earners, implementing wealth tax rates on assets, and closing loopholes that allow the wealthy to avoid taxes. So once the policy is successfully enacted, there should be more equitable and stable tax revenue available to the government. So it's going to enable the government to spend more on education and skill development, since the country has too low investment on education compared to other countries. So as the quote proves, the country is in a great need of increasing investment on education. And this is going to be closely related to improving inequality. So that ultimately the improved access to quality education, especially for marginalized communities, this is going to improve productivity and income rising. So it can contribute to decrease Gini coefficient value, which is way higher than the OECD average. Next, I can point out some potential restraints on my policy recommendation. Since recently, tariff has been eliminated. As the quote says, Turkey eliminated a 20% tariff from the imports from Russia. So this can discourage the government from decreasing other indirect taxation, since it can further decrease tax collection to the government. Also, there is expected high resistance from high-income earners and firms. The thing that government has to manage wisely and convincingly. Also, my policy requires other supportive policies to make viable impact, such as supply-side policies, things like that. Otherwise, it's difficult to achieve fundamental improvement on inequality in this country. In conclusion, I can say that, nevertheless, I still recommend the policy, since the restructuring tax system can be a great starting point of improving inequality in this country. All right, this is the end of paper 3. Thanks for watching. Bye.